Chapter 7. Friday morning, I slept as late as I wanted to. After breakfast, Zucchini and I made our parents a card. "Happy anniversary," it said. "We sure are glad you two met." If they hadn't, I explained to my brother, we wouldn't be here. We'd be... Asparagus' jaw fell open. Extinct like dinosaurs? No, not like dinosaurs. We'd be... not. Don't think about it, though, because it will make your head hurt. Next, we built a fort out of the boxes the new air conditioners had come in. We made secret escape tunnels out of the leftover duck toes, and then we booby-trapped it with water balloons. It was really fun. But all the time, I was just waiting for it to be 4 o'clock, when my ashtray would be ready. The glazes we had painted on Wednesday night had looked like gray mud. But Astrid had promised that in the kiln they would harden over the clay in bright colors and look like melted jewels. Finally, the time came, and my mother and I drove over to her friend's pottery studio. When Astrid opened the door, she smacked her cheeks and made pop-eyes about how big my mother's belly was. Then my mom admired Astrid's belly, which was about halfway pregnant. They side-hugged so their bellies wouldn't squash into each other. We followed Astrid into her studio. "I've got to go cover some wet pots, then we'll open the kiln," she said. She handed me a lump of clay, because artists know that other artists like to make something while they're waiting, and then she left. I started molding the clay into a toy mouse for my kitten, who's going to have a birthday this summer. "Actually, I'm glad we have this time alone together," my mom said. She patted the space on the bench beside her. This meant it was time for a serious talk, so I sat down and put on my "I am seriously listening to you" face, which I invented early in my career. Here is how you do it. Find a place on your parent's face that is right between the eyes. Stare there and move in close enough that you feel your own eyes starting to cross just a little bit. Then let your mouth hang open as though you are fascinated by what your parent is saying, and you are powerless to close it. This face always fools them. "Clementine, I really hate when you do that thing with your eyes. Please stop. I want to talk to you about this feud you're having with your father." "Oh, the sad animal drawings?" "No, not those. I like that you're doing those, in fact. You're presenting your side of something you really care about. That's what artists do. When they care about something, they make art about it. And sometimes their art makes other people care too, although sometimes it doesn't. The problem is the other thing. You're not speaking to him, Clementine. I'm sorry, but you can't force other people to believe something, no matter how much you believe it. And when you're having a disagreement with someone, it's always better to talk than not to. You need to start talking to your dad." I dropped my head. My day suddenly looked like a teardrop. My clay suddenly looked like a teardrop. I squished it into a ball. "I want to. I miss him so much, but I don't think I can anymore. Every time I see him, I think about that cow. I'm still so mad. It's as if that mad is blocking my throat. It feels like a big, sour lemon, and it's stuck in there." As I said it, I felt my throat close down, as if the lemon was a dangerous one that could make me cry. I get that, but it happens. People you love are going to do things you hate sometimes. You can't stop talking to them, though. I'll leave it up to you to find the right thing to say to your father, and the right time to say it. Just then Astrid came in. She walked over to the kiln and checked the temperature gauge. I stood up and gave my mom a tug to help her up. "Thanks," she said. "Now let's go get our pottery." When Astrid opened the kiln, I have to admit, I was a little disappointed. I guess I was expecting it to be like an oven when there's something delicious baking. It didn't smell like cookies or lasagna. In fact, I couldn't smell anything at all. And at first, I couldn't see anything at all. But then Astrid stuck a paddle into the kiln and pulled out a tray full of Mom's stars, which she had made for the new baby mobile. And my heart almost burst from the beauty. Astrid was right about the glazes. The colors gleamed like jewels. I held my breath as Astrid slid the paddle back into the kiln. I had used all the same glazes on my ashtray, but I had swirled them together. What if it made them turn back into mud? But when she pulled it out, there on her paddle was the most wonderful thing I had ever made. The blue and the yellow glazes met in lime green smears, spotted with caramel and turquoise. Feathery purple patches glittered with lemon sparks, and tangerine curlicues crept through the clouds of rose and gold. My mom and I thanked Astrid about 100 times for letting us use her kiln. Then we tucked bubble wrap around our pottery, packed everything into boxes, and carried them out to our car. On the way home, I was kept staring into my open box. Beside me, where my ashtray sat. "You look a little sad," my mom said, glancing back into the rearview mirror. "Is it going to be hard to give it away?" "No," I said. Well, a little. But we'll be at Margaret's so I can visit it. That's not it." "So?" "Don't you wish we had all that stuff at home?" I asked. "A studio like Astrid has with a kiln. We could make pottery every day, and other art too, like stained glass or paper mache or wood carving, whenever we wanted." "I'd have a drawing table 10 feet long," Mom said, "and big easels for painting at, and a place to do mosaics," I said. "I've always wanted to do mosaics." "And a forge for metalworks, and a weaving loom, and a jewelry workshop," my mom added. She was practically drooling. Once we got going with this dream, it was a little hard to stop. "How about a place to get a massage for your back when your back hurts from bending over the drawing table?" my mom suggested. "And someone baking chocolate chip cookies. I could always use chocolate chip cookies when I'm making art," I said. Mom laughed. "Well, I'll settle for a good coffee shop next door." She glanced back in the mirror again, and her face was serious. "You know, Clementine, you could have a studio of your own. There's plenty of room in the basement. Your dad could set you up with a nice space. You should ask him." "Maybe," I said, although even then I knew I couldn't. If you're really mad at someone, you don't get to ask him for a favor. No, if I had to talk to my father, my first words were definitely not going to be, "Will you make me an art studio?" Chapter 8. Saturday morning at breakfast, Radish and I gave our parents their card, which they loved. Then I brought up the problem of our no-name baby again. "Have you decided anything yet?" I asked, being careful to point my words at my mother. "We're talking about a few possibilities," she answered. Nothing definite." "Remember, it should be a thing name," I said. "Well, I still like Noodle," my dad said. He got up and scraped his plate into the sink. "It's a thing. It's a food. And what kid wouldn't love to be called Noodle?" My brother sprayed English muffin into his apple juice. He laughed so hard at this, but my mom ignored my dad, and so did I. Although, okay, fine, I thought he was pretty funny. Just then, my father's beeper went off. "Uh-oh, the building inspector's here to check out the new air conditioners," he said. "I won't be long." As I was putting the beeper back on his belt, he stopped, frozen, staring at it. His face lit up. "That's it! The perfect name," he cried. "Beeper!" Corn sprayed the rest of his English muffin into his juice at that. Then he slid out of his chair and wrapped his arms around my mom, laughing. "Beeper, beeper, beeper," into her belly. My mother rolled her eyes and waved my dad away, but she was laughing now too. I turned my head so nobody would see how much fun I wanted to join in the beeper fun, or how lonely I must look because I couldn't. "Of course it's a shame," my dad said, buckling on his tool belt, "to give up a great name like Noodle." Then his face lit up again. "So we'll hyphenate it. Noodle Beeper. There, I'm glad that's settled." As the door shut behind him, we could still hear his voice in the hallway. "Or maybe Beeper Noodle. Oh yeah, that's even better." I let myself laugh a little bit as I cleared my plate off the table. When I went back to my mom's plate, I noticed something strange. She didn't have one. "How come you didn't eat breakfast?" I asked. "Are you okay?" I'm okay, my mom answered, just not hungry. Well, what about Beeper Noodle? She patted her tummy. The baby doesn't seem hungry either. How about we put that mobile together now? And for the rest of the morning, we strung the powdery stars with invisible fishing line and then hung them from some driftwood branches we had collected at the beach last summer. Well, my mother and I did. My brother just stomped on the bubble wrap the stars had been wrapped in. Pop, 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 pop. It took a long time because the stars were all different colors, different shapes, and different sizes. We had to figure out the perfect spots for them all. They had to balance each other and be hung where each one looked at its best. They also had to be far enough apart that when a breeze moved them, they wouldn't clack into each other and get hurt. When it was finished, we hung it on the window, in the window near where the crib was waiting. Ochre had gotten pretty tired out from all that dinosaur stomping, so my mother thought it was a good time to wrestle him into a bath. I stayed in my parents' bedroom, looking into the empty crib and trying to imagine it filled with a brother or a sister. When are you coming? I whispered. Are you going to be a dud? Are you going to be a half rat? And what's your name going to be? For real? Then I went back into the living room and took my ashtray out to admire it for the last few minutes before I had to give it away. It was even more beautiful than before, and I decided right then that I was going to make another one, that one that would live in our house. The problem was, nobody in my family smoked. Just as I was trying to figure out what else could live in an ashtray besides a pipe, my dad came in. Boy, I wish I had something like this to store my beeper in, he sighed. He took off his belt and tapped it down the slide to the swimming pool, then set it down on the bed. This would be perfect, all right, he said. I looked up and gave him a smile. But my throat hurt just from looking at him, and my eyes were getting a little watery. Remember the cow and the meatloaf, I told myself. Then I picked up the wedding present ashtray and headed for the door. Time to give it away, sport? My father asked. I nodded. Nodding isn't speaking, and I walked out to the elevator. Don't be long, he called after me. I need to talk to you about tonight. Your mother's pretty tired with the baby coming soon, so for dinner. Luckily, the elevator doors opened then, and I hurried inside. If the rest of his sentence involved Mrs. Jacoby and a meatloaf, I didn't want to hear it. I pressed the button for Margaret's floor. Because I knew Margaret would be dressed up in her new outfit and shoes by now, I practiced a smacking my forehead saying, "Wow," on the way up to her room. It was Mitchell who opened the door, though, and I almost dropped the ashtray. He wore a suit and a tie, and his hair was combed into perfect lines. He looked like a movie star, except one that was still 13. He said hi, but I couldn't say hi back. I could only stare at him. I know, he said. I wanted to wear my baseball uniform, but Margaret insisted on this. Does it look dumb? And I still couldn't speak. I felt really strange. At first, I couldn't even think of a word to describe it, and then I did. Glozled. Which could N-O-T not be right, because I did N-O-T not love Mitchell. Just then, luckily, I figured it out. When Mitchell said the word baseball, you can practically see the love stars beaming from his chest. Because I was standing right in front of him, I must have gotten hit with some of them. You could stand sideways, please, I asked him, glad that my voice sounded only a little gozzled. And don't say baseball again, okay? Mitchell gave me a funny look, but he turned sideways, and then I ran past him down the hall. When I opened the door to Margaret's room, I saw her standing in front of her mirror. She looked like a big pink girl cake, a really fancy one, with frosting flowers and ribbons and bows trailing off of her. I put the ashtray down so I could smack my head with both hands and say, "Wow!" And I wasn't even pretending. Margaret spun around then, which was kind of a mistake in those shoes. Her ankles collapsed, and Margaret looked stunned to find them on the floor so suddenly. She snapped her ankles back up again and took a few steps towards me. "Wow," I said again. Fine. This time I was pretending a little bit. "Not too wobbly." Just then, Margaret's mother came in. She must have been beaming love stars like Mitchell, because looking at her also made me feel a little glozled. You look really nice, I told her. It wasn't that she was wearing a pretty yellow suit and a hat. It was more that her face had an I must be dreaming look I'd never seen on it before. Margaret looked a little glozled now, too, as if she'd been clunked by her mother's beaming love stars. She hobbled over and gave her mother a hug. She let me put some blush on her, Margaret explained to me. Coral shimmer. That's why she looks so great. Margaret's mother said it was time to go to the courthouse. And then she left to call for a taxi. I said, "Happy wedding," and I got up to leave too. "Here's the ashtray," I said, handing it over to Margaret. "All baked clean." And this time it was Margaret saying, "Wow." She took it right into her hand without making me wash it in the sink. So I knew she really liked it. "Thanks," she said. "See you this afternoon." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I thought you were going to the hotel after the wedding." "I am," Margaret said, looking surprised. "You're going too. Your father called my father a little while ago to ask if you could stay overnight. He said he was going to tell you about it." "Oh," I said, "right." Although suddenly everything felt the opposite of right. The end, and come back for chapter 9 soon. Thanks for listening.